on the Brown Bears Sports Network from Learfield IMG College. Welcome to the Brown Bears Podcast. Now, here's your host, Scott Cordischi.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Brown Bears Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Cordischi. Glad you could join us. The Brown Bears Podcast comes your way each and every week, and you can get it really wherever you hear your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and sometimes we even put this thing up on YouTube like today. And this week we are happy to be joined by a former member of our Brown women's swimming and diving team from the class of 2021. Han Nguyen is with us. Han, how are you?
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Scott. I'm doing fantastic. I'm just stoked to talk about my experiences at Brown and just reconnect,
Well, I'm stoked to talk to you about your time at Brown too, as it also pertains to something special that you were just most recently a part of. And for those who don't know, CBS just released season 37 of their hit reality show, The Amazing Race. And Han, I understand that you and your brother Holden were on the show.
Yes, Scott. Yes. Super, super exciting news. I ended up doing The Amazing Race with my brother Holden. It was definitely a journey. We've got the tears, we've got the happy moments, but I wouldn't have traded that experience for the world.
So just out of curiosity, what made you and your brother want to do this?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, for the past year and a half, I quit my job, my corporate job, a year and a half ago, 2 years out of my graduation from Brown. And I was kind of on a career break, looking to find myself, find inner peace, just get my personal life in order.
Mm-hmm.
And during this year of exploration, I kind of just let the journey take me wherever it took me. And I was actually home in December, and my brother had just finished up finals during the time, and he's over at Stanford. And instead of studying, he admitted to just watching a lot of The Amazing Race. And this was a show that we watched as kids. And when I was home, he was like, Han, like, I think we should apply. I really think we have a shot at that $1 million. Like, we should submit the video. And I don't know, but the timing of it all just worked out so well. I was actually going to get on my next flight to continue my travels the day after we submitted the initial casting video. But since the casting video went so well, I ended up coming back from my trip early to like continue on with the casting process. And it just ended up working out really well.
So that's really cool. So season 37 features 14 teams with pre-existing relationships, and it covers, I think, over 29,000 miles, 9 countries, 3 different continents. And I understand, am I correct in saying that your team is Team Asian Swag?
Woo! Yes, we are Team Asian Swag. I think one of the main reasons why we wanted to go on this show was to simply show that Asians are really cool. And what we mean by this is we're like, Holden and I are not a one-dimensional team. Like, we're not, in terms of our strengths, we're not super good at one thing. But growing up as kids, our parents really urged us to explore like things that we were passionate about and just dip our toes in everything. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed my time at Brown so much. But I think that's something that you're really going to see on the race is, for example, when we're looking at puzzles, that may not be our best strength, but like, and we're not the biggest or the most athletic team, but it's the complete package of just being multidimensional, being scrappy, like being smart as well, like being really funny. I'm not trying to pitch us as one of the funniest teams on the race, but I think my brother and I have extremely great banter. And that's just something you're going to have to tune in to see on March 5th.
Don't sell yourself short as a tremendous athlete. You were a Division I athlete here at Brown. You swam the butterfly, the backstroke, the individual medley. You set a program record in the 200 IM as a freshman at IB Championships. So don't sell yourself short as a tremendous athlete you are. And just out of curiosity, is Holden an athlete?
Yes. And thank you so much, Scott. And I think something I just want to point towards is like I said, I'm only 5'5", and I would say most of the swimmers in the Ivy League, they're 5'8" plus. So if you looked at me behind the blocks, there were a lot of photos of like, average height and then Han, an average height. And I think that was something also that was really helpful during the race is like those types of measurements of what typically is considered to be like the star athlete, those are standards that I never like adhered to. And so not letting those factors get into like my head or Holden's head during our time on the race was also very important in like our journey. Talking about Holden, he loves sports. He actually is a student sports commentator for Stanford, which is something that he really loves. Um, so we both grew up doing sports all the time, like in our household. We just had so much energy growing up, and our parents were like, all right, we need to like find a way to like bring all of this energy and channel it into something valuable. So we were very active kids growing up, and I would frequently, sometimes when I was coming home from school and my brother was really young, I would always see him in the backyard, like dribbling a soccer ball, like solo, and coming up with all these creative games and like imaginary games um, in the backyard. So I'd see him kick a ball from one end to the other, and like he would run to the other side and pretend he was passing it to another player. But we did grow up as very athletic kids. But I would say, like, in terms of just our personalities, I was considered to be the like more focused one.
So I'm curious as to how your Brown experience maybe helped you prepare for the amazing race. And I would guess let's start with swimming, right? I mean, as a Division I athlete, you know what it means to push yourself to an extreme. I would imagine that had to be at least part of helping you prepare to undertake an amazing event like this.
Yes, for sure. I think my entire life, I definitely strove for perfection. I strove for perfection in academics. I strove for perfection in athletics as well. And I think when you watch The Amazing Race, it's very easy to play couch quarterback.
Yeah.
Like you're watching a team run the other way, you're watching a team make a decision that you think could have been a better one. But I think something that you don't really realize when you're watching the race is how tough these teams are and how tough each leg is. And I think one of the most underrated strategies on The Amazing Race is just having the mindset of never giving up and continuing to push forward. It's similar to like being a D1 athlete. You show up every single day at practice, whatever practice you had the morning before or the day before, it's irrelevant to the time that you have spent training or the time that you have now to improve yourself for the next hour, the next 2 hours. And I think that's something that was really important to our time on the race is like, we're thinking about everything one step at a time and just giving our all in every single like future minute as opposed to hounding on the previous minutes. And I think also like my time as a D1 athlete and an Ivy League student, it was just like being able to manage all of that pressure was essential to just our journey on the race. If we're looking at like specific skills, this was something that my brother and I were reflecting on because we both come from pretty educated backgrounds. But we were thinking like, did our education, like our academic education, is there a direct correlation between how well we did and like just how easy the experience was and like I guess the academic education that prepped us for it. And I it's just I, there's some skills, and I'm just gonna make up a random example. But let's say there's a challenge that's dedicated to basket weaving. There's a very low probability that either me or Holden took a class that was dedicated to basket weaving, you know? So I think all of the skills that were most applicable to our time on the race are the soft skills that you learn from like very liberal arts education, like how to break down a problem, how to not give up, how to manage pressure. Um, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to take things one step further, there's two types of smarts. There's book smarts and street smarts, and you need a little bit of both, right, to participate and do well in the amazing race.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's also something that Holden and I wanted to highlight too, as well, is like we, when reflecting on our time on the race, like which one was more important or like what skills were most applicable to our time on the race, it's truly the full package. And that's kind of what we wanted to stress. Like being on this race is like, Asians are successful not because they're one dimensional. Like Asians are successful because they have like all this multi-dimension. I think a lot of our success or just our time on the race accounted towards like my travel experience. Or Holden, he was in a very high position at his military school and high school, so he knows how to like lead an organization. And so like it's like skills like that we learned in terms of street smarts that were super super essential, in addition to like the skills we learned in the classroom of like how to break down a problem.
So let me ask you this, Team Asian Swag. I know the show, did it start in Hong Kong? Am I correct in saying that? And then did it spend some time in Japan? Have you had or your brother any experience in the Far East?
Yeah, so Holden and I grew up traveling quite a bit, and I never went to Hong Kong. I have gone to Japan before, but I think that it's pretty funny because on the internet, some people are like, "Oh, do Han and Holden have an like Asian advantage?" I'm not really sure what that means. It gave me a little chuckle, but I think that like our ability to connect with all different types of people from like all of our travel experience, not just limited to Asia,
Yep.
I think was something that was extremely helpful. I personally don't think we had an Asian advantage, aside from the fact of being really, really swag. You know what I mean? um, but yeah, I don't know if there was a specific advantage in terms of Hong Kong and Japan, but it was so cool to see the color of like culture in Hong Kong and Japan, because I think that those cultures are very different from our Vietnamese background. And I think that like that's something that I hope people will see is like the Asian spectrum of like who we are is like very wide, like there's so many subsects within Asian culture. And I think Asian swag is kind of the umbrella, you know?
So did you and Holden, do you work well together or do you test each other's patience?
Scott, I love my brother. I will say, I really love my brother. I think that, so Holden and I, just to give a little bit of context, he went off to boarding school right like 2 years before I went off to university. So basically, I never really spoke to him or worked with him for like 6 years
Yeah.
ish. And the race was the first time that we had to put our heads together to work towards a common goal. And I think that like there's a lot of habits or just like mindsets in both of us of like how we perceived each other growing up. Like for example, the arguments we would get in as siblings was Holden wouldn't leave the toilet seat down, and then it would lead into this huge argument and we wouldn't talk to each other for like 2 days, and then I would go back to college, and so I would never see him again for like another year. But unfortunately on the race, that's not how it works. And that was definitely one of the biggest roadblocks. See what I did there, Scott?
Yeah. No.
One of the biggest roadblocks that Holden and I had to navigate. But like we are so grateful for our time that we had on the race. Wouldn't have traded for the world, but definitely there are points that weren't easy because of our sibling dynamic. But I do love my brother. I do not want to discount that.
So I'm not sure what it is about Brown University students and CBS hit reality shows, but I don't know if you know this. Eva Erickson is a PhD student in engineering here at Brown, and she's on season 48 of Survivor.
Yes, I did. I actually watched the episode last week, and I think I think it's so fantastic that first of all, I mean, I love the Ivy League. I love my fellow Brown athletes. I just love my fellow, just like Bruno in general. And I feel like Eva's story is very unique and it definitely adds, I think, more color to when we're thinking about the student body at Brown. So, because I think that a lot of the time when we're thinking about like really well educated, like alumni in, I guess, the media, I don't know if that's the right term, we're thinking about them in terms of like academic scholars and like all of these really cool, like earth shattering, like studies that are done and things like that. And I think Eva's story is super inspiring. I think she's gone through so much. And I think like I'm really proud to be a Brown alumni alongside her. And I'm definitely going to keep tuning in. And I'm Team Eva. That's all
So,
I'm saying.
you know what's really neat, and you can relate to this. So I work out almost every morning at the Nelson Fitness Center, and I never knew her name, but I see Eva there almost every morning lifting weights and working out as well. And then when I saw the previews for the upcoming season of Survivor, I'm like, oh my God, I know who that is. I see her every morning at Nelson Fitness Center.
That's amazing, Scott. It's like a celebrity sighting prior to like, you knew her before she was big. You're cool.
That's
You're
right.
cool.
That's right. So, what did you take? I mean, tell me about the whole experience. Did you enjoy it, and what do you take from it all?
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of traveling and I've been so lucky in this past year to be able to just follow my intuition and blow where like go wherever the wind blows me. And I think that something that I learned from my travels and from this was just it is so beautiful to share key and special moments with like your loved ones. I think there's a lot of beauty in traveling solo and spending time with yourself, but there's like extra beauty in sharing life with others. And I am so grateful that I got to share this experience with my brother. I'm so grateful like to all the cast members that we met because they are truly, truly awesome. And I'm so grateful for how beautiful and big the world is. And there were moments when Holden and I were under extreme pressure, but we always went back to the fact of how grateful we were to be where we were and how beautiful the world is. And like there were moments when it's so easy to just not realize that you're in, for example, Hong Kong, or like not realize that you're doing this really cool cultural thing that you would never ever get to do otherwise, unless you were on the Amazing Race in Hong Kong. And we just would relish in the moment truly. So I think that we just have such gratitude for this experience, such gratitude for my time at Brown and like my time with BWSD and all of those badass women. And I can't wait for all of you to see our story because I think it's a really, really beautiful one.
All right, March 5th, episode 1, season 37 of The Amazing Race. Han, for those who are either diehard fans of The Amazing Race that might be listening to or watching the podcast, or maybe for those that have never seen it before, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I would say, man, it's the race is very applicable to real life in the fact that you have to take life one step at a time, one day at a time, one second at a time, and really enjoy every part of the journey. And I think for those of you listening, you guys are in for such a treat for season 37 because I know all of you are going to be tuning in after you're hearing how cool Team Agent Swag is and how cool Han is. But I think also like it's a very beautiful thing to be present. And that's what I encourage everybody to live their life by.
Well, Han, congratulations to you and Holden for being a part of it. I am certainly going to be pulling for Team Asian Swag. I can tell you that. And thank you for
What?
joining us on the Brown Bears podcast. It's great to catch up with you.
Thank you so much, Scott. It was lovely chatting.
Han Nguyen, class of 2021, Brown University, former member of our Brown women's swimming and diving program, our guest on the Brown Bears podcast. And she and her brother Holden, also members of Team Asian Swag on season 37 of CBS Emmy-winning reality show, The Amazing Race. My thanks to Han. My thanks to you for tuning in. My name is Scott Cordishi. Have a great week, everybody.
You've been listening to the Brown Bears podcast on the Brown Bears Sports Network. For more information on Brown University athletics, visit brownbears.com.